Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1475 of the Locked on Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday here in mid-May. And I also want to encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen here at Locked on Hawks each and every day. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And today's show, with myself and Glen Willis of ATL 29 and Peachtree Hoops talking about our player capsule series and continuing that with a look at Saddiq Bey. If you missed it earlier this week, I talked to Glenn about the supporting guys on the roster for about 40 minutes of time. And then in between there, I talked to Robbie Calland of UPROXX Sports and Diamond UPROXX about the conference finals and about the lottery and a little bit of Hawks talk in there as well in a two-part episode. So this is our fourth show of the week, and we do appreciate you listening to the podcast, what this is going to be, but as a sort of a reminder of what the series is going to be like. From this point forward, Glenn and I will talk about a player every episode. Basically a breakdown of what they did well this year, what they might struggle with, what their role might be, some numbers, some fits, some X's and O's, all that fun stuff. And today is about 35, 40 minutes on Saddiq Bey. So hopefully you enjoyed that deep dive. After a brief word from our introduction of the podcast, I'll be back with myself and Glen Willis on Saddiq Bey.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I'm joined now by Glen Willis of ATL and 29 and other places to continue, I suppose, our player capsule series. Glen, welcome back to the podcast. It's been so long since you and I talked last.
I know. We have so much catching up to do, but we'll try to stay focused on the podcast agenda here.
Here we are after, and I'll just plug this now. We did about 38 minutes on the supporting pieces of the roster, but we're sort of digging in now for the first time to one of the core guys, and we're going to start not with the guy I would say is the lowest profile, but the guy who played the least for the Hawks this year, and that is Saddiq Bey. He, of course, came over midseason via trade for a bundle of second-round picks from the Pistons. Played 25 games in the regular season, and then also played in the playoffs, made 7 starts. Played like 600 minutes or so in the regular season, was a key factor in the Boston series, played 22 minutes a game in that series. I guess I'll start here. What were your initial impressions of Saddiq Bey? We'll get obviously a lot deeper in his offense, defense, what he can kind of do. But now that we've seen him play with the Hawks, and obviously you watched the whole league, so you've seen him play before this, about a third of the season, what'd you see?
Well, for me, when they made the trade, I was like, what do I expect? Because in Detroit, a team that was focused on development, they let him, and he seemed interested in a pretty big offensive role, creating, running pick and roll. And I was like, I don't think that's what we want.
And it was not what they wanted, I don't think.
And you understand, like he's building towards his extension eligibility. There's a financial kind of target. All of the guys, on the path he's on are thinking about. They want as much opportunity as they can. It's natural. It's understandable. And a lot of teams provide that, for those guys. And that's a way to kind of generate more buy-in and things like that. But when you come across to Atlanta, a team is trying to move up higher than the play-in, improve their, standings, improve their level of play, going into the playoffs. I was like, I'm not really sure what to expect here. But I thought he really bought into the role that they needed him to play. I thought he, obviously he's a great shooter. If you ask me, like, he's probably a top 25 shooter in the league, if you ask me, that all things considered. And he knocked down, I think he shot exactly 40% during his time with the Hawks.
Yep.
And stuff. But his willingness to set up on the weak side, catch the ball, shoot it if he has the space, attack the closeout defender with pretty sound ball handling, and pretty sound decision making, and to stay within that role template that needed from him, that really impressed me. And I, when they made the trade, I was like, man, how does this kind of fit what they really need to be? They'd be adding more defense. We talk about that all the time. That's not what he's really kind of going to give you. And I'm sure we'll talk about the defense and stuff. But you talk about a guy that just came in and did exactly what you wanted him to do from a role standpoint and from the boundaries of the things that he should be looking to do and staying away from things he shouldn't be looking to do. That was super impressive to me. Just that the buy-in, I thought it made a big difference. I thought Trey loved playing with him because of that reason. For example, not just Trey, but others as well. But that's the first thing that really jumped out at me early on. This time with the Hawks was like just buying into that role, and I think it was super valuable, and I think it made a difference.
I totally agree. And, part of what I do when the deal happened, like I said, you and I have seen him play before. It's like he was a total mystery to us. But I made some calls and emails and things to people that covered him in Detroit, just to say, what have you been hearing about Saddiq Bey? What do I need to know? Like, what's the scouting report? And it's kind of a mixed bag. Nothing bad, but kind of what you said. Like, he had a bigger role than he probably should have, just to be candid, in Detroit on a bad team. I mean, that's part of this too, is that you never really know with certain guys, especially role players like Saddiq Bey, who is a role player, like what they're going to look like when they've been exclusively on a bad team for their whole career to that point. It was only 2.5 years, but Detroit's been bad the whole time he was there, and he was playing a big role in that team. But like he did, I mean, I think it's been reported even like he wanted a big extension from them and was playing that way and put up some stats. I mean, it wasn't like he was not putting up some numbers, and he was shooting the ball well. Like you say, he's a good shooter. But yeah, it is impressive. And I think maybe it helps that he was going to a better team. Even though the Hawks didn't have this great season, it was a step up for him to like suddenly be in a playoff race for the first time. That probably helped, I would imagine. Also, you get a coach that he kind of arrived just before the coaching change, but he was mostly under Quinn. And I'm sure that was part of that too. But like, yeah, the fact that he was able to buy in, like his usage rate, this is only one metric, but was 17% in Atlanta after it had been 21-22 in Detroit. That's a pretty notable difference, I'll say. And for a guy as talented as he is, he didn't take a lot of mid-range shots in Atlanta. I think the Hawks didn't really want him to do that, but that was something he was doing more in Detroit. So yeah, I agree with you. Like as a top line observation, him kind of buying into that. Not a pure specialist. He's not that. He's not Duncan Robinson. Right. Like he can do other things. He can use it. He's a big, bulky frame guy. He can get to the rim. Some of that happened, but his primary value, I think, on this team right now was as a floor spacer and as a shooter. And he was getting threes up, making them, and that was a huge boost to them. And defensively, we'll come back to that later on. It's not great, but he is physical. And I also noticed this. I wonder what, I don't want to oversell it, but he's been extremely durable in his career. Yep. Which is not a small thing in the modern NBA. Like he played 77 games this year between Detroit and Atlanta. He played all 82 last year, and he played, I think, 70 or so as a rookie. So like he's been very available. There were no injuries to speak of, knock on wood. And like, the biggest thing, I kind of laughed when they made the trade about Landry Fields. It was his first big showcase as the number one guy after Travis. And the topic was Saddiq for the most part when they made that trade. And I think I asked, or Lauren Williams, somebody asked him like what the primary, appeal was with Saddiq on the current roster for this year. And he basically said the word depth about 10 times. Like it wasn't a bad thing. Like often you'll trade for a guy, you'll be wanting to kind of sell that player. And he did. He did say, it was like he always said depth. But it was just so funny, like how much he just kind of said, look, guys, this is a move to improve our roster because it gives us more depth. And they just didn't have any depth at that point. And that was my takeaway. It was, I think, a lot of people's takeaway. But when he actually got here, it wasn't just depth. He did give them a different element that was really impressive offensively in particular. And the numbers when he played on offense were really good. And you contrast that with other guys he was replacing. He played the 3, he played the 4. And he did cool off. I will say he was shooting like 50% from 3 for the first month. That was never going to sustain. But he still shot 40% on good volume. And I mean, offensively, like there's just a lot to like about a guy who will get it up like that and also be 6'8" and physical. Today's show is brought to you by Birddogs, a new sponsor on the podcast. And Birddogs is fantastic. It brings fit and comfort and versatility to the table with all of their products. I feel great wearing Birddogs. Their stretchy fabric and their shorts gives me a ton of comfort with the ability to wear the same shorts in different situations without having to worry at all, which is definitely appealing to me, to be honest. I am not someone who wants to stress too much about what I'm wearing, but I also want to be making sure that I feel good and what I have on makes a lot of sense in every situation. And Birddogs, make sure to check those boxes for me each and every time. I am not a dad, but I also hear from different people in my life that they are perfect pants for dads as well. So if you're into that sort of thing, it makes sense to me and hopefully to you as well. With that said, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. When you get there, you will find a fantastic selection of offerings, and you can enter the promo code LockedOnNBA. When you do that at checkout, they will throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every single order, adding more value to the process. One more time, check out birddogs.com and you'll find a great selection. Birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA is the place to go, and you will definitely enjoy Birddogs.
Yeah, it's funny. I went back through and just kind of noted a few like statistical things. You know me, I tend to watch things through the coaching lens. So I like the physicality. I like him embracing his role. And by the way, on his role, embracing his role. Oh yeah, he played at Villanova. You know,
Yeah.
those guys know like how to fit in and adapt. You see whether it's Mikal Bridges shifting into whatever kind of role is needed depending upon what move Phoenix made now, Brooklyn, and Jalen Brunson playing next to and behind, you know, Luca in the perfect way that they needed to. No shock in my mind that
No.
Dallas struggled in not having that just functional, constructive kind of guy that's there. And so the guy we saw in Detroit didn't look like kind of the Villanova guy. He looked like a guy who was trying to get paid, which is totally normal, like I said.
Agreed.
But going back to like, oh yeah, he's a Nova guy. Those guys, they understand teamwork and the formula, the team formula and stuff. But after I think he played his first game February 11th, and from that point on to the rest of the season, he was a team best overall plus 100.
Yep.
So you're right, and I think the next best bogey was plus 92. Okongwu was plus 88. From that point on, he 34 assists, 17 turnovers. That's a nice ratio for a guy who plays at the 3 and the 4. Not that I'm trying to throw anyone under the bus, but just to compare, Hunter had 29 assists, 24 turnovers,
Yeah.
and JC had 25 assists and 20 turnovers. And that functional part of his game of decision making, moving, attacking a closeout, having more of a handle, having more judgment and decisiveness kind of in that area of his game made a difference. And then the last thing I'll throw out here is that after the trade, the regular season, he plus Bogey plus Trey were plus 26.4. And that's insane. That was 137 minutes, so not a ton, obviously, but it's not like it was a 15-minute sample either. And when those three were on the floor, they played at a pace of 108.8. Golden State led the league in pace 102.5. So they were playing way over that Golden State pace. And
Yeah.
so, and part of Trey's resurgence, in my mind, was directly connected to what Bey gave them in terms of floor spacing that had to be respected by opposing defenses. Bey will sprint to the corner in transition. You know, he'll do all those kind of his play shows up in a lot of kind of winning areas of play and things like that. And that's just fascinating to me. And so it was sort of like, I think when you watch Trey and even DeJounte at times and others, he was like this breath of fresh air. Like, oh, I have this space now, that I didn't have before. And we've talked about the fact from the prior season, they were second in spot-up shooting efficiency. This season, they were 29th in spot-up shooting efficiency. Bey came in and just kind of restored a lot of the Gallo spacing that they had lost and not replaced, the Herder spacing they had lost and not replaced. I absolutely loved what he gave to this team. And in the playoffs, I mean, when you look at the Bey plus Bogey plus Trey plus 26.4, you think of that Miami playing game, and it was Trey and Bogey and Bey minutes that really powered them offensively through that. So I think he has, an absolutely huge role on this team going forward. It'll be interesting to see, how if he's viewed as a guy who they need to make room for him as a starter. Because right now the way the roster is fit, that's not really there unless you're going to do something pretty bold with two established starters there for a while. But sort of in a similar context, so we talked about the Matthews and Bruno contracts. He's on a nice number for next year, and that gives them 1 year of a lot of flexibility too. So to get the number he'll be on next year for the guy they got that played for them this year and brought as much as he brought, and his willingness to buy in to the role they needed, I don't know how it could have gone better, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I like the move when they did it. It was a lot. I mean, I think I care more about second-round picks than most people do, which I will certainly admit. But part of the appeal, and I think they would, whether they do on the record or off the record, admit this, part of the appeal of getting Bey was that he was cheap, money-wise. Not necessarily the trade, but like to have him under contract for the number that you just referenced for next year in particular, with their money challenges that they have. They have a lot of money committed. He is cheap, and he's obviously he's worth a lot more than that contract is going to be for next year. He's extension eligible. You and I will not cover that. That's not your forte, nor mine necessarily. But that would be interesting negotiation if there even is one. I don't know what it's going to look like. Maybe that has to do with role as well, because like you said, I think if they were to bring everybody back, and everybody in this case being Hunter and Collins, they're not going to start Bey, I don't think, on opening night if they have Hunter and Collins both on the roster. We'll see. But also for me, I don't particularly care. Like it matters on some level, but starting lineups just don't matter that much. I've always said this, and I'll still say it. He played a lot when he got here, and that was not a coincidence. That was on a team that was, again, basically entirely healthy for his entire time in Atlanta. He was still playing a big role the entire time. He was playing more than Jalen. He was playing more than AJ, and that was the right decision. He's better than those guys right now, today. Future-wise, obviously that's a different story. But he unlocked a lot about the offense. I think the biggest thing we covered earlier, not just the accuracy as a shooter, but the willingness to shoot them. He took almost 10 per 100 possessions. That's a very big number, especially for a guy playing some of his minutes at the 4. And he can play the 3 too. I mean, we'll talk about the defense in a second. That's more of the challenge with him. But I'm glad you said it too. The low turnover rate. He's not a great passer, but he'll move the ball, and he won't turn it over. And that's kind of all you want out of that. So yeah, I think we agree 100% about like the role and the way that he bought in and the way that he's used. And I made a clunky comparison after they traded for him to Gallo, and they're not the same player. They're not at all. But the one thing that they are, the Hawks had not had that floor spacing for like that. Collins, obviously that's a controversial subject about his floor spacing, but I think even everybody would admit that that's not his natural form. Whereas Gallo did other things too, but a lot of his appeal was as that floor spacer. Having Bey to do that, even at the 3, I mean, he's also been. I mean, unless you play bogey there, he's got more gravity than Hunter does at the 3, even as a shooter. He's a better shooter than DeAndre Hunter is. So they could do that a little bit too. I guess we should talk about the defense. We've been pretty effusive in our praise so far. That's probably going to stop about the defense, I would imagine. But okay, I'll frame it this way to you, Glenn. I'll be nice. It got better early it was really rough. I think everybody can agree on that was watching the team. It got better. What do you think about the defense overall right now, heading into next year, knowing that he'll have an offseason to be in the system, Quinn's around, but there were times early, middle, even in the playoffs where like it was like, man, he's kind of killing them on defense. And on a team that, and you can't divorce from context too, because you talked about the bogey Bey minutes. There are other defensive challenges, which makes him harder to kind of deal with defensively because you have Trey, you have Bogey, et cetera.
Right. Yeah. So, defensively, it was Stark the first half of that 6-game series roughly against Boston. He was plan B. He was the second guy in line to take some Tatum minutes. I mean, that was brutal and ugly. Reminder, Jason Tatum finished 4th at MVP.
He's a very good player. Yes.
Right. So it was a huge ask. Just the fact that he would step into and embrace the opportunity to go try, that says something to me, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you and I talked like in our retrospective episode that as the series went on, they went more and more and more towards just straight getting into switching, and he was pretty functional, switching the basketball. That never showed up at like his individual defensive rating in that series was like 129, I think, was just like an astronomical number, and stuff. So there's some work to do to, I think, kind of put him into lineups where he can kind of function. There's basically 2 general ways the NBA defenses play: straight man-to-man, chasing over, drop big, right? I don't know that he's ever going to really fit that, right? No. Very well, unless you're just playing a below-average offensive team, which happens across the regular NBA season and stuff like that. And then getting more into either 1-3-4 switching or 1-3-5 switching, and that's really going to kind of be more of where he's going to be. That's what they went to in the Boston series, and he became just a little bit more playable on the defensive end of the court. Like other guys we talk about, where he's never going to be a super mobile, lateral quickness, those sorts of things. He has he has solid length, but not a ton of length for the position that he plays,
Yeah.
But he's tough. He competes. He mixes it up. After he came over the trade, he led the Hawks in deflections by a pretty good number. And when he was on the floor, the Hawks won 70.6% of loose balls. And I think that was, he gets on the floor. And so just, again, he's going to have to buy into being a good team defender, a good help defender, a guy who works really hard as a rebounder. His box out numbers were really, really good too. And he was willing to go down there and put a body on a guy who's a lot bigger than him. when he was playing the floor. And that's where his defensive value is going to have to come, is in those areas. And as I watched him play for the Hawks, he kept kind of increasing his investment in those areas over and over and over. And that's what allows you to play him the last 18 minutes of a game if you have to, if you're behind 8 points or so, kind of most of the rest of that way, is the effort and that extra kind of connectivity that he's going to have to give you that allows him to stay on for those long stretches. And that Miami game, he played like the last quarter and a half. I mean, he played a long time. First of all, a long stretch with Bogey in the first quarter and then closing with him. And I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, as much as I love what John Collins brings to this team, you and I talked about the fact that you need options, optionality in the way you're going to go. And we need to put a lot more shooting on the floor. Bey's willingness to mix it up on the defensive glass, Bey's willingness to get on the floor for loose balls, his willingness to be physical and go move guys out of a prime rebounding spot. That's where it is for him on defense. That's where it's always going to be for him on defense. In addition to just working hard to become a good, effective switch defender. And he played on a really, really young, team in Detroit that didn't really kind of present any immediate accountability for defensive play. They're on a long upward slope is kind of the view when you're kind of building from where Detroit is. And so he got thrown right into it where they needed some defense too. And I thought he gave them enough in the areas where he's capable of giving you things, but still acknowledging there's got to be improvement in some key areas as well for him to really bring his best value forward.
Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it is all about making sure every single player is a perfect fit for your roster. It's the same thing when it comes to your vehicle. Every part has to fit just right. With eBay Motors, you can definitely find that. Anytime you're looking for parts or accessories, that's the place to go, eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure that every single part that you need actually fits right and does so the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage, look for the green check to know the part will actually fit or your money will be coming back to you. It's just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when it comes to shopping at eBay Motors. They have over 122 million parts to choose from and be back in the game in no time with eBay Motors. After all, it is easier to bring home a win when the right parts are actually guaranteed for you. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. One more time, that is ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Yeah, that's a good synopsis because, I think on the whole it was not fantastic, but there were bright spots that we should focus on that you said. I mean, he is physical, which the Hawks need a lot of. I mean, they've not been, honestly, in the league, the Hawks do not have the best reputation for being physical. They're not necessarily viewed that way. They were more of that later in the season, which maybe has to do with Saddiq Bey. That's not all him, but certainly he's a factor in that. He doesn't foul, which is good. He has a very low foul rate, always a positive for a team that has some foul issues and certain guys. And then when he was on the floor on the glass, it wasn't necessarily him getting the rebounds, but they did a better job as a team when he played on the glass, which is usually a good indicator. It's kind of a small sample size, only 25 games or so, whatever it is. So you don't make too much of that, but I think he helps with that. It's interesting because I'm with you 100% on the switching versus traditional. He'd almost would have been a great fit for those hardened Rockets teams that were switching everything because he is bulky, but he can't get through a screen. He does. He had some execution issues along the way, I thought, in the playoff series, but he'll hold up. He's not going to he'll never quit on a matchup. Like, he might be overwhelmed physically against a guy who's bigger than he is. He's not huge, like you said before, but if he's playing the 3, he's pretty big for a 3. He's not big for a 4, but he's at least physical enough to kind of hold up. And yeah, the guys who were quick enough to get by him, it's going to be tough. He's not going to be able to stay in front of a guy who is a real ball handler creator. Tatum's not even known as like this super quick guy, but he was blowing by him, and like I said before, it's Jason Tatum. You can't really judge that. He shouldn't be guarding Jason Tatum. We kind of all understand that, but I'll be interested to see what they kind of do with him schematically because certain matchups, and we'll save some of this for later, I'm sure. Like him and Trey defensively isn't the best pairing. Him and Trey on offense is a great pairing, but like you're never going to be able to switch as much as you would on some teams with Trey as your point guard, and Bey kind of needs to switch more. So that's interesting for sure. And also, like, I got to the point where he was essentially the primary backup 3 as well as the backup 4. Right. Is that the plan for him? Is he going to be playing more 4 if Collins is not here, for instance? Or, now you have AJ, who I think they're going to probably try to play more. Jalen's role, we'll get into those guys later on too. But options is a very, very important thing. I'm glad you said, because the tendency, as I know you know, for a lot of people, and this is not a criticism, is like you all you want to do is you want to list the lineup and list the depth chart and say this guy's this guy's this guy's this. And Saddiq Bey is a versatile piece, and it's a depth piece. He's versatile, and that's a good thing, not a bad thing. But it also makes it hard to kind of put him in a box, because like we know what he can do, but he's going to have different roles based on who's available, the matchup that night, and that's going to be interesting, I think, for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like putting him in the mix with JC and Hunter, it's like, okay, I need I just need more shooting at the three, just more spacing, from the three. Well, you can go towards Bey, and that, and those sorts of things. You got to adjust defensively for what you have there. To your point, like his biggest issue is navigating screens, and I don't know that he'll ever be good enough to do that a lot, right? And then at the four, it's like, I need to leave Hunter on, or I need to play Bogey at the three, and I've got to get more shooting at the four. You can slide him and positionally either way. You can play him 18 straight minutes and let him play with Hunter for a stretch and with JC for a stretch. Mm-hmm. And so his versatility, I think, is really, really interesting, even on the present roster, not knowing what the roster is going to look like next year. I know a lot of Hawks fans are looking for change at the forward position specifically, and they're excited about Jalen,
that might all happen. I mean, that's the thing. Like, that's the hardest part about doing this now is like we don't know who's going to be here. But again, that's part of the appeal of Bey, is that he can do different things.
Right.
And yeah, is he a step slow at the three? Yeah, he is. I mean, he's if you just said, okay, Saddiq Bey is a primary three, he is near the bottom of the league in mobility on the perimeter as a small forward. He's not a good mover there. But at the four, he's suddenly fine as far as being able to move your feet. Like, he's not a good athlete necessarily by NBA forward standards, but he is physical, and like it depends on the role. But at the four, he's kind of he's not. I wouldn't say small, but you know what I mean. He's kind of he's more of a small ball four, quote unquote. Yeah. So I don't know. It's all matchup constructions and lineups, and yeah, I wish we knew Glenn who's going to be here. That'd be easier.
No, I mean it's fun to think like. Before they made this trade, like when fans would say on Twitter, "Oh man, they just got to trade JC and Hunter," I'm like, "That's crazy!" Like with Bey, it's like that's not as crazy, If not, and people know I'm not a proponent of like trading the guys that frustrate us or frustrate Hawks fans or whatever. But I mean, they gave themselves more paths by bringing Bey into this roster. That going into this offseason. And for me, it's like I like a guy like Bey with Jalen. Jalen, I think, can defend at the 2, 3, 4, and in some small ball lineups, even he has some experience at the 5. That gives you so much more to work with, to work around Bey and even a DeJounte. Because Bey plus DeJounte on defense is hard. Like DeJounte's going to have to be better, and we're going to cover him.
Same with Bogey. I mean, that's the thing. Like they have these guys who are kind of flammable together. I mean, Jalen does help those guys in general. But yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm sure I'll be painted this way about Bey, but pairing him with Bogey or pairing him with DeJounte or pairing him with Trey, like you have a couple of targets that are playing together. So it's not a coincidence. Like, yeah, they were at their best with Bey on the court offensively when he got here by the numbers. Yeah. They were also at their worst with him on the court defensively. So it's like, what do you want to build? And maybe, it goes back to the core 10 that we talk about all the time. Like, they're trying to build an offensive team, and he does fit that, but it's like, can you just do enough defensively? And that is an open question without being too judgmental about Bey, because again, I was hopefully trying to pass this along a lot. Like when he got here, he played for, wasn't it like, didn't he have 3 or 4 head coaches in 4 games or something crazy like that? One of those crazy stats. Right. And like, it would have been, it's good to be kind to him about the adjustment period there. I don't think he's going to be as bad as he was for portions of this set, but it was the same in Detroit. Like, he wasn't great there either. So you got to have to just be realistic with what you expect.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, but I mean, just his, the flexibility he gives you because of his diversity. And again, so much of that comes because of what he embraced on offense, and then on the flip side of that I mean, Hunter would play next to him will help him a lot, right? Yeah. Hunter could take that primary responsibility. when you need another, like a second big man on the floor, like JC can help him. So we don't know what the change in turnover is going to look like yet, and I'm not even kind of ready to really really dive in around
it's
that
still
yet.
May. It's fun.
But I mean, what a great, just overall, just what a wonderful addition. And after the All NBA teams were announced, and Hawks fans were pushing back. That's what fans do, so it's fine. But I mean, when you look at Trey's efficiency numbers this year, you had to know he had no shot, right? He had absolutely no chance. And that's where I highlighted, like, okay, Trey had no space to work with this year. He just didn't. Two reasons. One is I don't think they had the right coach to really kind of get Trey and DeJounte really kind of fit in together. And the second part was just all the shooting that got sent out that wasn't replaced. And for me, it's like if you find a way to play Bey 30 minutes a game next year, Trey's numbers go right back to the level, in my mind, that got him with 13 All-NBA, right? I think he goes right back to being the guy, if not even maybe a little bit better. And that's exciting to me. And you could see, I mean, maybe this is me kind of imagining something that's not quite there, but a little, extra energy from Trey when Bey was on the court. Just feeling a little bit more, I have a little bit of space to work with. And I mean, all you got to do is look at what Trey did against Miami in the play-in this year versus what he did last year in that 5-game series. And it was, I know statistically it wasn't like this complete transformation, but they had a good offensive game, and a lot of that came with Bey on the floor. So he just replaces a lot of what they had traded in the prior offseason all in one player. And the embracing the offensive role and is willing to mix it up and be a tough competitor on defense despite his lack of kind of raw tools. As the coach of me is like, I love it. I absolutely love it. So it was a great addition, and I think he's going to play with the Hawks. I think he's going to play with Trey for a long time.
Yeah, there's a lot to like. I mean, I know that you and I would be in the high percentile of people who care about defense, and it does matter. I think some of the talk about Saddiq without picking on him is just a little bit one-sided, and because it did work beautifully on offense. It just did. I would just stress you can't ignore the defense. It does matter.
Yep.
How much it matters is up for debate, and the numbers were great. I mean, I think I just pulled it. Yeah, I pulled it just now. Him and Trey together, regular season, had a 122 offensive rating together. That's uber elite. I mean, and it's not a surprise because it wasn't a surprise to me and you either. But they went from having Herter and Gallo to having DeJounte and JC falling off as a shooter and playing Jalen. That was a drastic drop off, and it wasn't shocking to us. We kind of saw it coming that they were going to have these spacing challenges, but they had them. And Bey, not on his own, but certainly having that weapon to go to, in addition to the coaching change and everything else, open things up. And I think that Quinn, not only will he have the opportunity to kind of, thought bubble their way through the Trey and DeJounte thing, which is going to be probably the highest profile thing, but also how can we play lineups that have some of these defensive questions together? Because on paper, probably the scariest unit they could play offensive only would have Trey, Bogey, and Bey on the court together.
Absolutely.
Defensively, that's terrifying, but offensively, it's also terrifying in a good way. So what do you want to do? How do you want to pick and choose that? Yep. Can you live with that? Game plan wise, scheme wise, and that's more your department than mine. But to put it on, what you said is perfect. I think the way that they brought him in, he checks a lot of boxes, and having a guy like that, he's just different than what they had in every way. But there was just no one on the roster that does the stuff that he does offensively, while also giving you that physicality to kind of paper over some of the other weaknesses too.
Yeah, and even if you want to be like, wow, the defensive part of that trio we mentioned. But for me, it's we think about these games against Toronto, against Milwaukee, a lot of length, and where they were just kind of choking the ball out of Trey's hands, giving him no space. This season, the prior 2 seasons, Gallo could come in and function and really make a lot happen.
Safety valve.
An outlet. This year, they had nothing to go to, literally nothing to go to, right? And Bey came in and just restored a lot of that sanity. So in games where the other team is loading up on Trey, just like they did against Miami in the play-in, Bogey and Bey on, we're going to figure it out defensively, but we're going to give Trey the things he needs to do what he does best. And they didn't have that until they got Bey. They didn't have the option of putting 2 shooters at that level.
they're unguardable. I mean, I don't say that flippantly, and obviously, certain days it would not be this way, but the theory of Trey and those two guys, along with, let's just say DeJounte is the fourth in the perimeter and a center, that's fairly unguardable. I mean, if you have two dynamic shooters like that, and also Bogey and Bey can both do a little bit with the ball in their hands. They're not standstill only catch and shoot guys. They can do a little bit more stuff. Like, there's a reason why the numbers are what they are. Like, you can't stop that if they're going the way that they're probably going to be going. So the theory of the team is interesting in general. But and by the way, I know you said it before. That doesn't mean that they have to find a way to start Saddiq Bey this year. Like it's if he's their 6th, 7th man, it's fine. That doesn't bother me at all. We'll see. There's certainly a world in which he's starting at the power forward spot to open next season. That would not shock me at all. It will surprise me, I'll say, if he's starting at the 3. Okay. Only because I think Hunter is not likely to be traded, number one. But even if he was, defensively, if you're starting 1, 2, and 3 is Trey, DeJounte, and Saddiq Bey, there's some alarm bells for me. Yeah. So
you need at the 4 and 5, you need Draymond Green and Draymond.
Yeah. So anyway, we won't have that rabbit hole now, but there is a world in which he's starting. There's a world in which he's not, and I think that he's going to have a prominent role, and he'll help the offense a lot. And that transaction worked out very well, and have that be your big splash move in the middle of the season. That isn't what pushed them to a different level, but it definitely helped them quite a bit. So
and to get that without giving up a 1st round pick, to get that without giving up one of their young guys, I mean, just a wonderful transaction, and it's going to have a positive impact going forward. We talked about the flexibility, the shooting, replacing the things that were traded. I love it. I love him. I hope that they can situate him defensively in a way that he feels more confident with what he can do and what he can bring. I trust Quinn to do that as much as any coach. So can't wait to get to October and kind of see the way he's fitting in even better.
Agreed. I would love to know what the roster is going to look like, but in the meantime, we know that he fits a lot of different people, which makes it easier to talk about him than some. So we can leave it there for now. But don't forget, everybody, if you missed it, by the way, in our first conversation in our capsule series, they also got Garrison Matthews and Bruno Fernando in that series of transactions, which were certainly we could probably level with each other and said those were less important moves, but they were helpful moves down the line. So that was all one big package, and kind of a good debut moment or 2 or 3 or 4, however you want to say that, for the new front office structure. So There you go. Glenn, we'll wrap it up there on this Saddiq Bey only podcast, in which we managed to not go an hour. Anything that people should know about your work and then where they can find you, my friend?
Yeah, once again, looking forward to having some persistent presence here, and then ATL and 29 podcasts. Kevin and I will find our rhythm, especially as we start working towards the draft class. I told you I'm going to do about 100 hours. I'm 25 hours in now.
That's a good sample size.
Yeah, so I'm making progress there, and I'm sure we'll cover some of that as we get closer to the draft. The lottery is this coming week, right?
It's Tuesday, yeah. I'm not sure when this is going to.
It might already happen.
It might have already happened, but as we record this podcast, it's coming up.
Yeah.
Yes.
The joke there is that our episodes are so long, it might have happened, but just because of how long our episode is. It's Tuesday. But no, Peachtree Hoops. Supporting those guys a lot of times behind the scenes now and stuff like that, and then on Twitter at Willis_Glenn. I have a lot of fun talking with Hawks fans and NBA fans over there. So if you haven't followed me, come have some fun.
Check out Glenn's work. That will do it for today's podcast. We'll have more in the future on the rest of the core 10, so to speak, on the Hawks roster. Please subscribe to this podcast. Check out Glenn, and we'll see you all next time.